Mike the Truth Jackson back with another edition of Fighters Talk, and today I'm joined by UFC bantamweight Aljamain Sterling. How are you feeling today, man?
I feel pretty good. I'm in Houston.
Yeah, so I don't think we've ever heard the name Aljamain out here. What brings you to Houston?
I actually came out here to do a charity event, the Shriners Hospital for the One Step Closer Foundation, and then today we're going to go to another hospital and see some other kids and just donate some of our time and hang out with the kids and, you know, give back a little bit.
That's good, man. We need to get more of that. And I don't think we hear enough about fighters giving back to the community. We see them doing, you know, seminars and things like that. But as far as charitable kind of actions, we don't see enough of that. What do you think that is? Like, why don't we get the positive side that athletes do?
You know what? It's really hard to say why. I think people just kind of get caught up with the daily grind of everything that they're doing. You know, life sometimes takes over, you know. Everyone's human, you know, so we all have our responsibilities. Like, even for me, I would like to do more, but, you know, again, life sometimes tends to creep up on you, and it takes up a lot of your time sometimes, you know. So I think that's probably why. I would like to see more athletes doing it, just in general, not even just MMA, just athletes as a whole. I think they need to start going back to their communities more and donating their time to especially the places they grew up, man, because a lot of times you see these athletes, they make it, and they probably come around once every 3 years or something like that to just kind of say what's up to mom and pops or something like that, you know. So it's weird. It's like, you know, you're here, you should be the kind of like that pioneer for the next young cat coming out of your hood. So that's the way I kind of like to look at it.
Now, especially everything going on with in this country right now, what is your take? You know, we don't. Another thing we don't see a lot of. We don't, especially let's say in the black community with fighters. We don't hear their voices enough, especially what's going on right now. What's your take on kind of the current state of Black America? All the things going on right now. What's your take on it?
It's man, it's very disheartening to see a lot of these actions go unpunished. And, you know, I hate being that guy who would say, you know, if it was a black officer or an officer of who's a minority, I feel like they would be more likely to have some type of punishment to happen to get thrown their way. But it's just really bizarre, man. And I feel like athletes as a whole, once again, should be speaking up on it. I think, not even I think, I do know that a lot of us are told a couple of topics to stay away from, which is politics, religion, and there was another one, I forget what it is, but you're just told not to talk about those things because you kind of put yourself as a scapegoat because people tend to twist your words and misinterpret things that you didn't even say. They say, well, you meant this because you said that. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true. There's multiple ways to comprehend something. Reading comprehension skills, you can kind of hear what someone is saying, and you could take it one way or you could take it another way. And I'm always a glass half full kind of guy. So I always try to, whenever someone says something to me and I feel like they might have said it the wrong way, I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt that they meant to say in a more positive manner or they meant something in a different light opposed to taking it the negative route. Right. And people are so quick to do that, man, and it's kind of, it sucks because it's almost like they're pitting races against each other at this point. We're in it's 2016. Why is this still an issue? This should not be an issue at this point, but sad to say, it really is, and I still live in a world like that. So it's very unfortunate, man. I just wish more people would speak up on it. I tend to say some things once in a while, tweet about it, and give my 2 cents. I try not to go too gun-ho about it because obviously I don't know all the details of everything, but some things are just so blatant and in your face. You're kind of like, bro, seriously? Like, what else do I have to do? Like, turn my back and say, put my hands up and then get shot? Maybe something will happen. You pin both of my hands down to the ground and then you shoot the guy because he's resistant. How is he doing? I don't know. We're all human, man. Everyone should be subject to punishment. It's just like anybody else, even equal. Yep. Right. And I understand. I respect the police officers and the like veterans of, you know, the military and things like that. But at the same time, you're not a god. Right. you should not be untouchable. That's the thing that I just can't wrap my head around. If you were to do that across the board to everybody, every single race, then I could kind of be like, well, that's kind of the norm kind of thing. But when it's kind of the media specifically has an agenda to pinpoint these cases where it's a white cop typically gunning down a black man or a Hispanic man, and then they post it all over social media for everyone to kind of, you know, it's starting like an inner riot, man, and it's kind of scary because I'm nervous about what can potentially happen because of that.
I agree. Now, you're from New York, and that's kind of the one thing that stood out to me is the whole stop and frisk thing. Being a black man from New York, has that ever been an issue for you?
Well, the good thing is I haven't actually lived in New York City itself. I'm from the suburbs of Long Island, from Unionville. It's a mainly Hispanic and all-black town. Okay. So growing up in there, it's a little different. We didn't have those laws enforced out by us, but you can tell when a cop is pretty much racial profiling right from the jump. I've been to places like Long Beach. Right. I've been to places like Garden City, and those are like rich white areas, predominantly white, you know. Long Beach, it has a good mix, but you have those cops who come out, and I remember one time I got a ticket for a beer can that wasn't even mine. It was the most bizarre thing, and I had to go to court and go pay for it because the cop said the lady was calling 911 and said there was people outside her house. I was like, we literally just got here. There's a beer can on the floor. We just got here, just got out the car, and he said, well, there's nothing I can do about it. You gotta have to defend this in court. And I'm like, this is real life. And for me, I was a young kid. I think I was about 19 years old. And I'm like, man, I could have just turned up and wilded out and, like, you know, bugged out on the guy. But I'm just like, you know what? Keep it in perspective. This could have been a lot worse for me. So there are those cops who are kind of doing the right thing and they're not the extremists. But you do have those guys who are poorly trained and need to. I know a lot of cops. I have a lot of cop friends that I think you should not have a badge. This guy should not be a cop. But this is what we're dealing with. This is real life.
And that's definitely the issue. I feel a lot of this going around all this. You have people who are inexperienced. They lack the training. Need to become a police officer. You know, you're in a position where you're on edge. When you're on the clock, you're on edge because you don't know what's going to happen. You're out here trying to stop crimes. Yeah. You know, and then you get these people who are untrained and mentally unstable for that position, and then you give them a gun and you give them power. And I think that's where a lot of this lies. So, you know, we definitely, like you said, we need to change some of these laws.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with that. Some of these guys, they're inexperienced with other cultures, so they don't understand how to interact with a person of color because all they see is the negativity or the BET videos and music videos and things, the big chains and stuff on TV, and they just think automatically they associate that with black equals dangerous, minority equals dangerous. It's just like, it's a big disconnect, and guys need to be culturally diverse before they can be sent out to a field where they've never ever experienced anything like that. Because I can understand why there could be a high stress rate where in a high stress environment where you're kind of like your trigger finger's kind of itching kind of thing. So I get that, but at the same time, you shouldn't be there. You know, you should not be there. Why put that guy in that situation? And who's in charge and who's appointing these guys? You know, I went to this thing called Fight for Peace in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Borough Hall, and Lisa Evers was there. She was the one hosting it. She's a very well-known personality in the hip-hop and minority community, and especially just I would say nationally. And it was interesting to see the lieutenant up there voicing his opinions and his things on his piece on what was happening, and then you had the lawyers up there. You had a couple of rappers from that neighborhood, and just interacting and speaking on some of the things that they're seeing every day on a daily basis. And for me, that was very eye-opening to see that the officer himself also recognizes what is happening, but he knows the system is flawed. It's just, what are you going to do about it? What can we do about it as people of, you know, we're paying these guys. Right. We're paying these guys essentially to gun us down. I mean, there's no other way around it. Like the whole thing with Colin Kaepernick, I respect the guy, and I appreciate everything that he's doing, and I agree with the protest. I understand the disconnect where people may feel it's a disrespect to the people who have died and gave their life to the country, but that's not what the protest is about. He's not saying, screw the guys who died for this country. He's saying, screw the guys who are going out there shooting people, and it doesn't have to be black, just shooting people in general and not being held accountable. you have to be held accountable. And I think we live in a great nation, but at the same time, we could be doing so much better with the way our police officers interact with the civilians.
The crazy thing about it is when Colin and just other people, they say what he's actually kneeling for, and they tell them, the people, and they just, it's like we're not saying it at all.
Yeah.
Which that I think is the most baffling part of me. If we're saying, well, we're not against the military, we're not against police. Look, my biological father is a police officer. I have a long list of family friends who are police officers, and we're not saying all cops are bad. We're saying we need to stop police brutality, and you swear we're just like we're making shit up,
yeah.
which is wild to me. But we'll change up a little bit. But speaking of New York, you guys just had some big news.
Yeah.
MMA, it was made legal, and now you have the first event that's taking place up there. I correct me if I'm wrong, but amateur MMA was legal in New York.
Amateur MMA was legal in New York, yeah.
Now, have you been to any local MMA shows out there?
I've been to a few. Stopped in whenever my manager had a couple of events going on with some guys that he knew, and I would stop by, show some support, and I was once an amateur. I had 7 amateur fights. It was always cool to see those big name guys coming out and just coming back to the area, or just coming by to say what's up to the guys. I think it kind of gets them more motivated, more excited to fight, because they see somebody who's in a position where they kind of want to be later in the future.
Now, what do you feel now that professional MMA is legal and sanctioned in the state? How do you feel this is going to change the dynamic of the sport as a whole?
I think it's going to be great, man. I think you have the Mecca in New York, where it was kind of blacklisted for such a long time. I think now that it's legalized, it's going to cause like just an explosion, a nice little boom of growth in jobs, I think, for one. And then just people coming out to train more. I think gyms are going to start to do a lot better, because people are going to start to become a lot more familiar with the sport. And even for me, like, there's a lot of kids in my community where I grew up. I actually used to teach and coach there. And people were just unfamiliar with the sport. They didn't know anything about it. If it wasn't boxing, they didn't want nothing to do about it. If it wasn't basketball, it wasn't football, they didn't want nothing to do about it. I came and I started wrestling in 10th grade. So when you have, for me, I think it's going to be very influential on the minority community for sure. I think you're going to see a lot more brothers and sisters coming out, trying out, and seeing what it's all about, learning the art of jiu-jitsu, learning about the gentle way of self-defense and things like that. Learning how to defend yourself, just a whole. I think it's gonna be a huge thing for just this entire state of New York, the entire aspect of the sport. I think it's gonna be something memorable for everybody.
Have you seen I guess an increase in schools being opened out in New York City?
In New York City, I'm not too sure. I mean, I go there probably once or twice a month. I don't go there too often to kind of check out gyms. I'm mostly trained by me, but I wouldn't see why not. I mean, I know they have a couple of UFC gyms out there, so it should probably take off soon.
You come from you have a solid gym. What was I want to say there was a video the whole gym released, you, Chris Weidman, all those guys. Was that a genuine reaction when the news broke about MMA being legal?
Yeah, it was. We were like, everyone was excited, we did a lot of campaigning, especially Weidman and a few other guys. I went out there in March, and when we all found out that everything was going to happen, and everyone just on cue, we're going to record this, and everyone was excited. It was like, no, we can't just not capture this moment. We got to make sure we get this epic day recorded for everybody, documented. So that was a really cool moment to share with the team.
And lastly, now that they released the card, you have some notable names from the New York kind of, I guess, the state area that's going to compete on this card. How do you feel? How do those fighters feel that you're trained with? Like, how do you feel that being Madison Square Garden for the first time? What are their emotions like being on this card?
And I think they're ecstatic about it, just because you got all the biggest fights that happen and the biggest games that happen at the Garden, and to have a huge sport, especially a huge organization like the UFC, to be locked out for so long, I think this the excitement about it is going to be nothing short of surreal, and they're definitely pumped about it. You know, my whole thing is I kind of wish they spun it a little bit better with more so like a New York against the world kind of thing. I thought that would have been so dope. That would have been cool as hell. You got guys from Japan, guys from China, guys from Brazil, guys from Hawaii, everyone coming out fighting in New York or something like that, or fighting someone else from the States or England or Ireland. I think that would have been a huge event. I mean, it's still a huge card. You got a lot of notable names, but for me, I would have liked to see more real New Yorkers there. You got Wyman, and he's pretty much the only real New Yorker on that card. I mean, you got Natal, but he's actually from Brazil. He now trains out there at Henzo's. But yeah, man, that would have made it a little bit sweeter. But besides that, it's gonna be a great card. Now that they got Conor and Eddie Alvarez, Wyman versus Yoel, Raquel Pennington versus Misha Tate. There's a lot of big names. And you got Frankie Edgar, who's on a freaking prelim. You know, that's crazy. That's like
that is wild.
Yeah. So that means they got some New Jersey names, but they need some New York blood, more New York blood on that card.
Actually, one thing I just thought about, one of the dopest shoots I've ever seen, whether it be a fighter or not, was you and Eric B. I know when I saw that, because for me, music is influential to me. For you, how big was it? Well, just even to meet Eric B. How was that for you?
It was awesome, man. You know, he was very down to earth and very knowledgeable about the game in general. And I think the music game, the hip hop game, and the MMA game is very similar in terms of the business aspect of it. You know, you're pretty much an independent contractor. You're going out, you're trying to build your fan base and your notoriety, because essentially that brings in more dollars. So very similar. The way he explained everything, broke everything down. I was very humbled to be able to sit down and chop it up with a guy like that. So that was cool for me. And you know what? I heard a lot of his music growing up, but I was never like super big on like the old school hip hop. I was more so like the new LL Cool J, like that era that kind of time. But I knew he was, and I knew what he did and what he meant for hip hop in general and just the music game overall. So for me to be able to share a room with him and take a couple of pictures with the guy and chop it up, that was cool, man.
I swear, and I know it was simple. Yo, where were y'all in New York?
The Bronx, Uptown.
Nice. So I know what that meant, just, being from New York and getting that opportunity. Like I said, it was simple shots, but I thought it was dope. Like, when I saw him, I was live. Like, I mean, you've seen some crazy, stuff, the Conor McGregor bank shoes and all that. Like, all those pale in comparison to that Eric B shoe, man.
Yeah, man. I had the big gold rope chain on, the high tie, just got my cut, just had the fade taped up and everything. And we're walking down the street and people are like, yo, Eric B. And then they're like, yo, Rakim. I'm like, man, sorry, I'm not Rakim, and I'm Rakim for the day, so it was cool.
That shit was dope, man. Well, I appreciate you coming out, man, giving me this interview. It was dope, my homie.
Appreciate it.